It's a pleasure to come and share with you today. It's a beautiful day, and even you as well over there. So interruptions are good because I was a kids pastor for 12 years, and so I'm used to having kids moving around and being restless. It's adults that I'm quite used to it because they're always sick. And they might even write notes and things like that, and it really freaks me out. But a little bit about me. This is my family. And I've been married for 9,646 days in January of 12th of this year, which turns out to be 26 years. And they're my boys. I've got a 22-year-old who's turned 22 on the 22nd of this month, and I've got a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old. I know you're looking at me and saying, he surely can't have children at that age. I got married when I was 12 years of age. And I actually said that in a workshop of kids, and they go, oh, is he allowed to do that? So anyway, I use a good moisturiser, and so with the brand. Well, the thing is, I've had three vocations, three callings that I felt that God has given me. One is I actually was started as a critical care nurse. I majored in intensive care and accident emergency. I had the privilege of looking after people at their most vulnerable and supporting their families, and I loved doing that. I did that for 15 years. I worked at the Children's Hospital for a number of years as well. And then God had a different idea, and then I was invited to become a children's pastor at a church in the eastern suburbs called City Life Church, usually used to be called Waverley Christian Fellowship. And there I was there for the next 12 years, but then God had another idea, and then he chose that I was to go and work for Focus on the Family. And Focus on the Family, you may have heard of us on the radio, and ironically at the age of 14, I wanted to be a DJ on a radio station. So I used to record myself. I used to say, hey, this is Brett Ryan on 3XY, and I got some songs for you. And I know it's a bit silly when I say that, but it's true. But the thing is, ironically, you know, some 40 years later or something like that, I am now on the radio because I've got a face for radio, so it actually works out really, really well. And but I'm not playing tunes, but I'm actually giving some advice on families and parenting and marriage and life in general. And you're never too sure who's going to be listening at that right time in their cars or in their home. And it's very humbling to be heard in about 650 radio stations across Australia. So you're never too sure who's going to be listening and what's going to be said, and giving someone a sense of hope and purpose. But I'll talk a little bit more about Focus a little bit later on, because I know you're keen to go and do another workshop or something in a few moments' time. Something like that. Anyway, I got half an hour and now I've got 15 minutes, so I speak quickly. What I'm going to be talking to you today is I'm going to give you all a reality check. Because what I think I actually got for you today in my short time in the opening remarks, I have got something in 5 words that I can guarantee will change your world. 5 words, and if we all did this, it will change your world individually, but it will change your family, and it will change your workplace, it will change your school, it will change everything about your world if we applied it. But we'll get to that in just a moment. Here's a reality check. This is what's happening in our society today. 129,000 marriages, 49,000 divorces, 77% of couples live together before they get married. Mental health is on the increase. We have 1 in 5 people have a mental health issue. And today, 6 people will be successful in taking their own life, and about 30 people will attempt it. That's the reality. That's the reality in our society today. And there are so many different issues that are going on in, about family violence, domestic violence, and we only hear about 20% of what actually takes place, which is frightening. If you hear it on the news and you say, it's happening again, that is only just hitting the tip of the iceberg. But there's other areas of drugs and alcohol, and ice is an epidemic, and particularly in regional areas across our nation. We also have the area of obviously mental health and crisis. 1 in 4 young people before the age of 18 will have some sort of mental health crisis or some sort of dependency. So it's an interesting area that we live in. It's a fast-paced world. Work-life balance is a very common expression that we use. And then we have an aging population, and in a few years' time we'll have more baby boomers than ever before, just the sheer population. And then we also have the area of special needs, and I've got a very soft spot for special needs families, but that could be for another time. The thing is, I'm going to show you, I'm going to go backwards in just a moment. I'm going to show you a little clip, and this is a clip called Irreplaceable. And this little movie. It's just about 2 minutes. And it gives the state of the nation, or a reality check across the world, and what is happening in our society today. And I think you'll be challenged by it.
Family is crumbling and falling apart. We can see that everywhere we look. Broken family is everywhere. And that's why I'm going on this journey. To travel to the ends of the earth if necessary, to find out what is wrong with the family.
This idea that you're supposed to separate emotion from sex.
It hasn't created the freedom that was promised. It's actually made a culture of slaves.
We live in a consumer society, and that has been translated into relationships.
Our culture is so much about me and the individual. We should be encouraging a world where men and women embrace their roles as parents.
Boys need these models of manhood, of how to be a man, and they're losing out on that by not having their fathers involved in their lives.
When you have that cultural attitude that fathers don't necessarily play a unique and irreplaceable role in their children's lives, us dads ourselves often underestimate how important our role is.
I don't want that. I don't want it for my kids. I don't want it for anybody. I set out on a journey to find out what's wrong with the family. I never realised how much of an impact it'd have on me.
What do you think a father can do to be a better father?
It's easy to blame a lot of other outside factors, but I find it is my own selfishness, my own desires, my own laziness, that can tend to get in the way of giving myself away to my children, to my spouse.
I got lost. I was blind. I've come so far in life only because I had so far to go.
The Bible has taught me not to change anybody else, because I can't change anybody else, but it's taught me how to change me.
I want to be there for my kids, for my wife. Not just physically present, but really there for them. Really loving them.
As you can imagine, I've seen that a few times, but every time I'm very challenged by it. The fact is that we have to keep a mirror close to our own face. Because we can point to all the destructive and all the world that we're living in and say, I've got it all together. I'm doing better than you. However, we haven't all got it together, and we're all fallen short of what our God has given us. We've all fallen short of the ideal of how God wants us to live. We look at this verse and it seems for all have sinned and fallen short of our ideal, what God had intended. He actually wanted us to live a life worthy to be called Christ followers, to be called Christians, but yet we all fall short. And it's easy to point the finger and say, hey, I'm doing better than you. Nah, 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 nah. But yet, we have to always be reminded about this area that we've all fallen short. The thing about families is that when anyone does a survey, they actually say, you know what? My family gives me the greatest joy. If you filled out the survey a little bit more, what gives you the most amount of frustration and anger? My family gives me the most amount of frustration. This idea is that it gives our greatest source of happiness, and it gives us our greatest source of grief and heartache. But what do we do about this? We have to really apply these principles. We've all fallen short. We know that families and relationships, and whether you have a family right now or whether you'd like to have a family in the future, whatever you are, whatever stage of life you have, you are all part of a family. Sometimes, unfortunately, you've been in a family that are dysfunctional. Other times you're in families that are together, and it's great to have like a family sort of camp environment where people can actually do life together and enjoy each other's company. But not everyone has that privilege. And I have to take that as a reality check when I'm talking to front of people, because there's single parent families, there's divorced families, separated families, families that have been abused and neglected and harmed in lots of different ways. Because God intended for families to be the bedrock, to be the foundation. We are all on creation. The next bedrock was families. So we're all here on the ground, Mother Earth. That's the first point. The second point was families. But that has become fragmented. Gone are the days of the normal, typical mum and dad and those type of things. It's just not existent anymore. It should be, but it's not. But he wants us to have really healthy families, because if we get this right, if we honestly get this right, it can change the nation. I mean, I know it sounds very naive and, probably nice to say that, but it will be the linchpin on, if we get this right, it could change our whole society. But how do we do that? Well, let's keep the mirror close to our own face, and I'll get those 5 things. We need to take seriously about how God wants us to do families. And I honestly think that the church should be doing the best at having the most wonderful marriages, the most engaged and involved parents, kids that love being with their parents. And I have to say, that's probably my greatest joy. I mean, I've had 3 careers, as I've said, but my greatest pride and where I get my greatest joy, I am very proud of my marriage, and I'm very proud of being a parent and my relationship with my boys. I don't say that prideful. I actually say I've been very intentional with my marriage, and I've been very intentional with my parenting. And unfortunately, when you're talking to an audience and they go, it's okay for you, you've had it easy, you've got it all together. Well, they don't know the hard work behind the scenes. It takes a lot of work and heartache and, tears, and I've had my fair share this year as well. As the boys are getting older, they're making choices that I'm not too really thrilled about. We won't go into great detail about that. But we see how the situation where we have God's ideal for us, and then the reality that you and I live in. And we look over there and we say, surely we cannot get there. He's got this perfect model for us to live. And yet we're way back over here, this reality that we live in, and we're going, how do we get over there? I know what we'll do. Let's bring the ideal a little bit closer to ours, so it's not such a big gap. Can you relate to that? We actually say, hey, we're never going to get there, so why bother? Why try and get to this perfect model? So let's just bring it back, and so our standard is not, the gap is not so large. There's a tension between our real and the ideal. And we've tried to bring it back to saying, hey, let's not make the gap so large. But God knows that. God understands what's going on with this ideal and the real. And he's actually pretty comfortable with it. He says, but I've got a standard that I would want you to meet. To be a loving, caring husband. To be a loving, caring wife. To be a loving, caring mother and father. To be a loving and caring daughter and son. To live on this earth, this is the ideal. This is the way I want you to live. I know you're back here, but you know what? That's what he knew that, and that's when he sent Jesus. I mean, that sounds a very obvious thing. And he is sort of that bridge, if you like, from our real to the ideal. I mean, that's the gospel right there. That bridge building between this ideal that he wants to set. And he knows that we'll never attain it this side of heaven. Just letting you know, we're not going to get there. No one's going to get there. There's only one, and that was Jesus Christ himself. He lived the ideal model. But you know what? That's what it's to be a Christ follower. To be Christ-like. We're never going to get there, but you know, it's worth the effort. It's worth the heartache and the tension and all those things to get to where this ideal is. Has anyone seen the TV show House Rules? Are you allowed to watch that, sir? Just checking. Better check that. There's a TV show, and they actually have these house rules, and they had to have a model of how a house was going to look like and the decoration and what have you. And they gave this set of patterns. But God in his infinite wisdom also has given us a pattern, a guidebook, if you like, and saying, here's some house rules. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into great detail. But here is just there's a snapshot of the most standard rules. And husbands love this one. Wives, submit to your husbands. They bring out that card and go, yep, look at that. They look at that. But that's for another day. This other side that says, husbands, love your wives and don't be harsh with them. Love them as Christ loved the church. And then we have the next one as children, obey your parents. And parents, they love bringing out those cards. And this one, fathers, do not embitter your children or provoke your children. I'm a work in progress there because I laugh at my kids. Especially when they got hurt or when they're throwing a tantrum because their face is so funny. Does anyone can relate to that? Am I the only one? Because you know when sometimes my wife sends me to my room. And I have to come out and apologise to my kids. And I come out to my kids and go, sorry, hold that thought. And I go away, get my act together and come and apologise. But I say all these rules that we have then, as I said, husbands can bring out this, submit to your husbands. But we only have to go one verse prior. And this is the verse that we forget. Because we see these verses here in verse 22, then 23 and 25 and 26, and it goes down through. But there is a verse 21. And this is one I wanted you to focus on. And it says this. Be subject or submit one to another out of reverence for Christ. Submit one to another. So it's not just women submit to their husbands, but it's husbands to submit to their wives. Kids to submit to their parents, and parents to submit to their kids. If you're an employee, to submit to your boss. And if you're a boss, you need to submit to your employees. If you're a student, you have to submit to your teachers, and teachers need to submit to the students. This is something that's very difficult to do because we have our authority, we have our title, we have our position, we have our, the way that we do life. And, I'm in charge and therefore you need to listen to what I have to say. But if we really want to have this reality check, if we really want to do something different that will transform our world and your life and your family and your marriage and in your relationships and everything like that, this is the thing. And when I said to you before about the 5 words that will transform what this verse actually means, and here it is. How can I help you? How can I help you? How can I bring out the best in you? How can I actually form a lake to make sure that you succeed in everything in your God-given potential? If you're a kid here and you go up to your mum or dad and say, how can I help you? Well, your mother would probably faint and you need to be picking her up. And then she would say, my son said, how can I help you? That's just so beautiful. You could probably leave right then and you still get the brownie points for that. And that will last for about a week. And then you can go and say, how can I help you? Oh, he did it again. Husbands, when was the last time you said to your wife, how can I help you? My husband said, how can I help you? I don't know what to say. I need to lie down. Think about it. This simple phrase, how can I help you? If we really genuinely want to be and fulfill what God had in mind to be his followers. Because what it said, Jesus did not come to be served. He said, I have come to serve. He said, how can I help you? How can I help you? And if we did that, honestly, this is a game changer. Could you imagine just for a moment what your household would be like if everyone had that as just a phrase that I actually say nearly every day? How can I help? What can I do for you? How can I serve you? Kids go up to mums and dads. Mums and dads go up to their kids. Husbands and wives doing this mutual thing. How can I serve you? How can I help you? You may not even have an answer, but at least it's there and it's open. If you're a boss, if you said, how can I help you succeed to become the best employee possible? Or you go up to your boss and say, look, I don't want a pay rise, but I want to see you succeed. How can I help you? And if you were in church leadership and you had people coming up to you and saying, how can I help you? The leader might faint as well. This is a game changer. This will transform your world. It will transform your family. It will transform your school. It will transform your workplace. It will transform your church. And it will transform your community. If we honestly did this out of Ephesians 5:21, submit one to another out of reverence for God. In a nutshell, 5 words. How can I help you? Let me pray for you. Father God, I just thank you so much for the privilege of being able to share your word in a way that may be a little bit different from other people's styles and what have you. But Lord, the principles are timeless. And this principle is one that we should all apply to our lives. Help us achieve what you have said in your word. Help us have families that are so challenged to live the life to be worthy to be called Christ followers. But Lord, I also pray not only just be challenged by it, but actually not just be hearers of the word, but to be doers of the word. And I pray a blessing upon that. Let it transform our families. Let it transform our marriages. Let it transform our parenting, our workplace and our schools and wherever we may be. And become the men and women you have wanted us to be. That ideal. We thank you for that, Lord, in Jesus' most wonderful name. Amen.